Board. He's also a native of my hometown, Philadelphia, and he's also serving as our interim pastor at First Baptist Church in Philadelphia. So it's my pleasure to have him today, Dr. John Martin.
Would you pray with me? Gracious God, maker of heaven and earth, we are grateful to you. We are grateful for your goodness, for your love, for your mercy, and for your never-ending faithfulness. You have been good to us, Lord. You have blessed us in freedoms that many in this world do not have. You have blessed us with an ability to worship freely without any fear of recourse. You've been good to us. Today, God, we ask for you to be in this place. May the Holy Spirit lead your children to discern, to know, to cast votes, and to stand for what is good and for what is holy. God, may any in this place that does not know you, may their hearts be softened to your gospel. May you sear in their conscience, Lord, the right and holy decisions to make as well. God, you've been good to us. May we continue to walk with you and continue, Lord, to see your blessings. We ask all of these things in the name of the one whose blood was shed so that our sins may be forgiven. The name that is above all names, my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge, please. Attention. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Close the machine, Madam Clerk.
There's a quorum present, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We'll have the reading of the journal. Gentleman from Rankin moves we dispense with the reading of the journal. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Report of select committees.
We have none, Mr. Speaker.
Report of standing committees.
We have reports on the calendar, Mr. Speaker.
Introductions of bills and constitutional amendments. Gentleman from Marion, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the reading of the introduction.
Is there objection? Hearing none, we will do that. Resolutions, petitions, memorials, and other papers.
We have none, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This time we'll have introductions of guests and visitors. Gentleman from Hines, Mr. Brown. He passes. Gentleman from Jackson, Mr. Busby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House and the South Gallery, we've got the executive team from Halter Shipbuilding down in Pascagoula. We got Mr. Mark Scott, Mike Dufresne, and Bob Merchant. Y'all make them welcome.
Gentleman from Jones, Mr. Scoggin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This time I'd like for you to introduce to you two people that are visiting with us today. Brandy Pickett, who is the State Faculty President of Community Colleges, and she is from Meridian, and Chris Steverson from Itawamba Community College, and he is the Vice President of the Faculty Association of Community Colleges. They also have put on your desk a cookie from the Mississippi Faculty Association of Community Colleges for you to enjoy. Make them feel welcome, please.
Lady from Forest, Ms. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a special guest in the South Gallery today. Her name is Lise Parrish. She is a student at Millsaps and a fellow with the Women's Foundation legislative group over there. She's going to be doing some interning with us this year. She's actually a constituent of the gentleman from Choctaw, but would y'all help me make her welcome today?
Jim from Copiah, Mr. Holloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the doctor of the day, Dr. Edith Rayford, OBGYN from the Community Health Center from that little big town down I-55 south to Double Nickel. Let's help make her welcome.
do we have any other introductions? I don't see any at this time. We will go to the calendar. Rules calendar. Recognize the chairman of rules.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If we could go to the rules calendar, it would be number 1, HCR number 8, and call it up, make the usual motions.
You're recognized to present the resolution.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Mississippi State University Bulldogs baseball team commend for the winning of the 2021 NCAA Baseball Championship. We will have them coming at some point, but we're going to go ahead and get it off of the calendar so it'll be ready and I can get it set up so that we can present it to them. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Questions on the resolution? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. If you favor the resolution, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Close the machine, Madam Clerk. I vote 119 yeas, 0 nays. The resolution passes.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all members of the House be allowed to be part of this unless you would not like to be, and you can go list your name as not if that meets the approval of the House.
All right. What else you got, gentlemen?
Mr. Speaker, if we can go to number 2, HCR number 21. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the State of the State authorized joint session for January 25th, 2022 at 4 p.m. This is the governor's speech. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Questions on the resolution? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. If you favor the resolution, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Everyone voted. Everyone voted. Close machine, Madam Clerk. By a vote of 119 yeas and 1 nay, the resolution passes. Next item.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to ask that the 3, 4, and 5 be left on the calendar. That's all I would have at this time. We're waiting on a couple little things for these other ones to make sure that we do them correctly.
All right.
Thank you.
Rules use the floor. We're down to the general calendar. Item 1, Judiciary aid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to go item number 1, House Bill 770, call it up and make the usual motion.
Lady calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended, bill considered and gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Ladies recognized.
I have a strike all, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, you're recognized for your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This strike all is the Mississippi Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. As the members of the House know, the state of Mississippi is the last state in the nation to have a state cause of action for equal pay. In the strike all, Section 1 states that this act shall be known and cited as the Mississippi Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. Section 2 encompasses all definitions. The definitions include employee, means any individual who's employed to work 40 hours or more a week who is employed by an employer. Employer means a person who employs 5 or more employees. We have a definition of wage, which means it includes all compensation paid by an employer or his or her agent for the performance of services by an employee, including the cash value of all compensation paid in any medium other than cash. Rate references wages on the basis of compensation for services by an employee for an employer and includes compensation based on time spent in the performance of such services. We have a definition of unpaid wage, which means the difference between the wages actually paid to an employee and the wages required to be paid to an employee as provided in this act. Skill means be measured by factors such as experience, ability, education, and training that are required to perform the job. We have effort, which means the amount of physical or mental exertion needed to perform a job. Responsibility means the degree of accountability required to perform the job. We have working conditions, which means it includes the following 2 factors: the physical surroundings of a job, including but not limited to temperature, fumes, and ventilation, and also the hazards of a job. Primarily, all of these definitions come directly from the Equal Pay Act itself or case law. Section 3 is actually the standard that is taken directly from the Equal Pay Act, and it's actually the test. The employer paid higher wages to an employee of the opposite sex, perform equal work on jobs requiring equal skill, effort, and responsibility, and worked under similar working conditions. On lines 53 through 68, we have the affirmative defenses that an employer may use: a seniority system, a merit system, a system which means earnings by quantity or quality of production, or any other factor other than sex. So these affirmative defenses may be used by the employer to show that the wages were not paid to an employee based on sex. We added in this particular strike-all some other examples that an employer may use as an affirmative defense for any other factor other than sex, and you'll find those on lines 60 through 68. 1, the salary history or continuity of employment history demonstrated by the employee as compared to employees of the opposite sex in the same establishment. 2, the extent to which there was competition with other employees for the employee's services as compared to employees of the opposite sex in the same establishment. And 3, the extent to which the employee attempted to negotiate for higher wages as compared to employees of the opposite sex in the same establishment. And all of these examples are taken from case law in federal court where there has been a claim of wage disparity with respect to sex. We have on line 69 that the provisions of this act may be enforced by private action in a civil suit in the circuit court in the county of Mississippi where the cause of action occurred. If the employer is found to have violated the provisions of this act, the employee shall be awarded reasonable remedies which may include attorney's fees, prejudgment interest, back pay, liquidated damages, and 100% of the difference of unpaid wages. An employer who is paying a wage differential in violation of this act in order to comply with the act cannot reduce the wages of an employee. So in other words, if an employee is going to bring a claim under this act, and there is, for instance, a male who's being paid a higher wage than a woman, then the employer cannot lower the wages of the man. You would have to bring the woman up. We also have a no retaliation clause in this particular act. It's going to start on line 80. No employer may discharge, discriminate, or in any way retaliate against an employee by reason of any action taken by the employee to invoke or assist in any manner the enforcement of this act. So an employer cannot take any kind of retaliatory measures against an employee for bringing a claim pursuant to the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. Section 4 is actually the statute of limitations.
Lady's time has expired on her amendment. I will grant 2 more minutes.
Thank you.
Lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's actually just 2 years from the date that the employee knew or should have known that the employer was in violation of the act. And lastly, I want to say we did include in the strike-all provisions that just simply say, because there is, at this particular point in time, no case law for which our trial courts, our circuit courts to follow, that if there is a suit brought, it has to be pursuant to mandatory federal law. What I mean by that is from the Constitution or the Fifth Circuit or any federal lower courts. Since they've already decided these cases, our circuit courts here in Mississippi have to follow the mandatory decisions of these courts. And there is one last section, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to bring the body's attention to, and that just simply says that if you bring a claim pursuant to our state cause of action, you can't have at the same time a claim pursuant to the federal court of action. You get one bite at the apple. So if you have a state law claim, you have to maintain that state law claim before you cannot have two claims simultaneously in the federal court and the state court. That's an explanation, Mr. Speaker.
All right, ladies, as time has expired on the strike all. Question now recurs on the strike all. If you favor the amendment, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. Now we're on the bill. Anything further on the bill, lady?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Any questions on the bill? Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Criswell. Try it now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the lady yield?
Oh, definitely.
So from what I understand, there is federal law that covers this already. Am I correct in that?
No, you're absolutely correct.
So do you have the numbers, or do you know how many women have had to use the federal law in the last year or since existed, I don't care what the time frame is, to remedy a situation that they've had at work? Do you know that number?
So I don't have a definitive number. So the Equal Pay Act, it's in 1963. So this is 2022. So definitely from 1963, from the 60s up until now, I mean, we pretty much can conclude, especially from the 60s to 2022, that there has been wage disparities for women in the workforce. And so in the cases that I have seen, and I have looked at case law from several different circuits, Fifth Circuit, Seventh Circuit, Ninth Circuit. I've looked at U.S. Supreme Court cases, their decisions in this, and this is a problem, in other words, that otherwise I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have had a federal statute, a federal act in the 1960s. But not only that, even more so, I would venture to say, gentlemen from DeSoto, we have state law acts with the exception of Mississippi. So in other words, for the 49 other states, they have implemented some kind of measure to provide remedies for employees who feel that there are wage disparities based on sex.
But we don't know how many in the last year have had to go to the federal courts to do that. Do you have any idea of the number of women, if we go ahead and pass this and put it in state court, and I understand it makes it a little bit easier for somebody who has this problem, do we know how many, do we have any kind of estimates, how many women that would affect?
No, I don't, but gentlemen, if it's one woman, that's one too many.
But we don't have a number.
If it's one woman, gentlemen, it's one too many. If you had one case, you asked me, well, you said, well, you don't know the number. If you have one woman, that is one too many. I do think, I will say this to your line of questioning. When you think about, and I'm not sure how many of the men in here have daughters, you have mothers, you may have sisters, but I want you to imagine just for a second if your daughter comes home, and I know this because my daddy loves himself some Angela, okay? So for the men who are in here, I mean, I'm pretty sure if it's anybody that you love, it's your mother and it's your daughter. I mean, you care about your wife, but you're definitely gonna love your mother and your daughter. So if you're... So if your daughter comes home, I want you to imagine, I'm being serious. I'm being serious. If your daughter walks through the door, gentlemen from DeSoto, and you've invested all this time, you know, in her, imagine from the time she was born, and you just looked at her and you cried, and she came home and she said, Dad, you know, we've gone to state, we've gone to USM, and, you know, I've got all this training, but, you know, this person, you know, 2 rows down the office hall from me is making this amount, and, you know, I'm making this amount, then I can only imagine what you would feel. And so, but think about it on the flip side, when a woman is actually incurring this and going through this. That's why I said if it's one woman, that's one too many. And I don't think we can underscore the historical significance of the Federal Act, right, being implemented in 1963, and there is still a need for it today. So to answer your question about numbers, I don't think we can encapsulate it in terms of numbers, and I'm not saying that your questions are important. I'm just saying that I do think if you had one case, if you had two cases, you're not going to be able to quantify it by the numbers, because one case is one too many.
Well, and I understand that, and just to make it clear, I'm going to choose not to address, because this is recorded, the wife-daughter issue. But I guess what I fear is I don't like passing laws just for the sake of passing laws. And if we don't even know how many women have had this issue and tried to go to federal court, it seems to me we're passing a law that we don't even know it's going to help. If we had some numbers to say, if we pass this law, we know that there have been 20 women in the past year that have gone to federal court, and it's difficult, and we know at least we can make it easier for them. But if we don't even know that number, I'm concerned we're just passing a law because it feels good. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you answering questions.
Well, and if it will help, gentlemen, because I don't think, because to some cases, as you very well know, settle out of court. You bring your claim and then it settles. So with respect to, because we don't have any cases here in Mississippi under the state, we would have to be looking at our federal courts, right? We would have to be looking at the Fifth Circuit. I would venture to tell you, even though we don't have numbers per se, it's voluminous because it does exist. And again, I don't think that you would have all these surrounding states and states all across the country that are implementing these acts if it was not an issue that needed a remedy.
Thank you, lady.
You're welcome, anytime.
Gentleman from DeSoto, Mr. Eubanks. Try it now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentlelady yield?
Definitely.
I was having a conversation with several other members, and the question, I know you've written this bill so that it also takes care of it the other way. So if males maybe aren't making as much as females, but the question of stuff like maternity leave, or maybe the differential in cost for, say, maternity coverage with your insurance company may be greater for the female. I guess the question is, will businesses be obligated if somebody were to bring cause of action to them to say, well, hey, I deserve the same amount of protected maternity leave as any female when I have a child? I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, maternity leave right now applies to spouses, so men get maternity leave now.
It's equal federally, I guess, I think.
Yeah, if they want it, men can get maternity leave now. But that's a really good question. So in other words, you're right. This does apply, for instance, if you had a man who said, hey, there are females and we're doing, equal work, then it would apply to them. Yes, definitely. And to answer your question with respect to the maternity leave, it does apply to spouses if they decide to take it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't see any further questions. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 770. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed, vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 111 yeas, 5 nays, the bill passes. Next item, drug policy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call up item number 2, HB number 232, and make the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves that the rules be suspended. Bill considered and gross read the third time, placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the House. This is the Uniform Controlled Substance Act. This is a bill that passes every year. It is sent over to us by the Mississippi Department of Health. And what it does is it makes drugs in Mississippi in state law compliant with the federal law scheduling. And what it does this year is it includes 20 fentanyl-related substances as Schedule 1. It includes aliceridine as Schedule 2. It includes lemborexant and rimamazolum as Schedule 4, and cenobamate and lasmiditan as Schedule 5. That's what it does. The Department of Health has asked for this bill to make our state law compliant with federal law, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, as long as I don't have to spell these words.
You want to run through that again?
No, sir.
Questions? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question regarding House Bill 232. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you oppose, vote nays. Everyone voted. Close the machine, Madam Clerk. About 119 yeas, 0 nays. The bill passes. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I call up the next item, item number 3, House Bill number 813, and make the usual motion.
Gentleman calls the bill up, moves the rules be suspended. Bill considered in gross red the third time placed on final passage. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Gentleman's recognized.
We have a committee amendment.
You're recognized for your amendment.
All the amendment does, this is a bill, let me explain the bill, then I'll explain the amendment. This is a bill that creates, that asks the Mississippi Department of Health to do a study on the insulin pricing and to provide a report to the legislature by the end of the year. Originally, the bill said 18 months, and in committee, we amended it to say that they provide that study to us by December 31st of 2022. That's what it does. There are problems with insulin pricing. The Attorney General's office has been working on this. I have asked for a little help, and so we're trying to get this study so that we can make some conclusions about how to proceed with dealing with insulin pricing. So that is the explanation of the amendment.
Questions on the amendment? I don't see any. If you favor the amendment, indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it.
Move final passage.
Anything further on the bill? Any questions on the bill? I don't see any. Open the machine, Madam Clerk. Question occurs on House Bill 813. If you favor the bill, vote aye. If you're opposed to vote nay. Has everyone voted? Has everyone voted? Close the machine, Madam Clerk. By vote 112 yeas and 5 nays, the bill passes. Drug policy yields the floor. Wildlife passes. Brings us down to Judd B. Passes. Brings us to the end. There's one more drug policy bill on here. Gentlemen, you pass it. All right. Announcements, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the following people would turn in their laptops to basement room 6, so they can update Office 365 for you. The following representatives: Gary, both Andersons, Anthony, Arnold, Bailey, Bain, Banks, Barnett, and Barton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to do page pictures immediately after adjournment.
All right. Announcements, Madam Clerk.
Accountability, efficiency, and transparency will meet after adjournment today in room 103.
Announcements by the members. Gentleman from Jones, Mr. Scoggin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce that tonight around 6 o'clock, if you don't have supper plans, down at the Camper Caucus in the back side of the Trade Mart, we're going to have a cookout. President Industries are going to be back there barbecuing ribs and grilling. We will be eating inside so you won't freeze. You're welcome to come about 6 o'clock.
Gentleman from Prentice, Mr. Turner.
Adjourn in memory, Mr. Speaker. I'd like for the House to join me today as we adjourn in memory of Catherine Verona Miles Richardson, who departed from this life on 1/16/22. This lady was the grandmother of our colleague, Tracy Arnold. She leaves an amazing legacy to reflect her good life that she has lived here and the influence she's had on other people. I'd like to just share this with you if you don't mind. She had 5 grandchildren with one deceased. 5 children with one deceased. She had 24 grandchildren, one deceased. 77 great-grandchildren. 97 great-great-grandchildren. 2 great-great-great-grandchildren. So this lady, she led a godly life on this earth, leaves this earth to her wonderful family, host of family that will reflect her legacy for a long, long time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Sounds like an outstanding life lived. I think it would be appropriate for the entire membership to be placed on that. If you wish not to be on it, go by the clerk's office. Our sympathies go out to the gentleman and his family. Gentleman from Alcorn, Mr. Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not believe I voted myself and my desk mate on the first, I guess it was a Freudian slip, on the first House calendar on the rules. So I guess we need to be, as much as it pains me, to vote us yes for that.
All right, we can record that. Gentleman from Madison, Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adjourned in memory.
Yes, sir.
Mary Daniels, resident of here in Hinds County, passed away this week on the 17th. She is a close friend of me and my wife's. I ask you all to join us in recording her memory.
Thank you, sir. Gentleman from Warren, Mr. Denton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adjourn in memory.
Yes, sir.
I ask the House to adjourn in the memory of an 8-year-old young man from Vicksburg named Brody Kincaid Larry. He lost his battle with cancer this week. When you may have seen him on the news, when Make-A-Wish Foundation asked him what he wanted, the only thing he wanted was to see Spider-Man. So they did that for him. So I asked the House to please keep the family in your prayers and uplift them.
Thank you, sir. We will do that. Gentleman from Rankin, Mr. Yancey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the House adjourns today, I'd ask that we do so in memory of Ms. Sandra Coletti. She's a good friend of our friend Leanne Robinson, and she passed away, and we'd like to adjourn in her memory.
Thank you, sir. Gentleman from Tishomingo, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adjourn in memory, I'd like for the House to help me adjourn in memory of Miss Martha Seegers from Iuka. She was a business lady, pioneer of several businesses there in Tishomingo County. She died yesterday at her residence.
Thank you, sir. Gentleman from Madison, Mr. Blackman, do you have something further?
Yes, and I forgot a very important thing about Ms. Daniels. She was the first office director of the Mississippi Legislative Black Caucus Foundation for years. A lot of the young members probably don't remember her, but she served us for years in that capacity.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any further announcements. Gentleman from Octavie Hall, Madam Clerk wants to know if you want immediate release on those resolutions that we passed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any objection to immediate release? Hearing none, we will do that. All right, I don't see any further announcements. Recognize the gentleman from Octavie Hall for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move this House stand adjourned until 9 a.m. in the morning.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. House adjourns until 9 a.m. tomorrow.